Good afternoon, everyone. I'm ready to go whenever you'd like to begin.
All right. Hi there. I'm Rachel Haynes from CTV.
So I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
Yeah, I know. It's a little loud in here.
Yeah.
Rachel Haynes from CTV National News. I wanted to talk to you about the Golden Dome discussion that we've been having and that President Donald Trump has been posting about. Last night he posted about it, saying it will cost $61 billion if Canada it does not join as the 51st state, but if Canada does join, it will be free. All of this is happening as there's unprecedented trade tensions between Canada and the United States, and I wonder if you have any thoughts on what kind of role this discussion of the Golden Dome will have in the trade negotiations, if Canada can use this as leverage in those ongoing trade negotiations.
Oh goodness, I don't know. I mentioned Golden Dome in my remarks today. It is an imperative that we figure out how to defend Canada and the U.S. from a multiplicity of threats as not just nuclear proliferation increases, but missile technology advances into the hands of lots and lots of folks. Whether it'll become part of the trade discussion, I don't know. I don't know if it provides leverage or for whom that leverage might be. But it is absolutely imperative that we do this together for geographic reasons, for technology reasons, just pure physics. To get this right for the American people will require deep connectivity with Canada, its defense establishment, and the technology that both nations can provide.
Thank you. And I'd also like to ask if, while you were part of the previous Trump administration, if he ever brought up Canada being the 51st state at that time.
I don't recall. No, it was new to me when I saw it.
Why do you think he's bringing it up now?
He's the consummate deal maker.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary. Marc-Andre Cossette from Global News. As my colleague was mentioning,
I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble hearing.
Oh, is this better?
A little bit.
Okay, wonderful. Good afternoon. My name is Marc-Andre Cossette from Global News. We saw yesterday that President Trump is again musing about making Canada the 51st state. We've heard that our Prime Minister said that will never happen. My question for you is, how can Canada trust the United States with that kind of rhetoric coming from the American president?
Oh, that actually easy. Canada ought to trust the United States. We have deep, long, lasting relationships. They expand far beyond any presidential administration, any Congress, any Prime Minister here in Canada. This is connectivity. You can see it from this forum, right? At the commercial level that is deep, historic, and important. So the answer is that Canadians ought to trust the United States in the same way Americans ought to trust Canadians. And I'm convinced in the sweep of history that will remain.
And President Trump has suggested yesterday that it would cost Canada $61 billion to join the Missile Defense Initiative. Do you think the president is serious about that figure?
I don't know the source of that number. It's expensive to do a missile defense at the scale that's required for nations that are as expansive as the United States and Canada, and especially doing it combined. It's an engineering problem, it is a physics problem, a technical problem, and it is a deeply expensive challenge as well. But I think that it is one that is worth the investment. We've seen as Israel has created an incredibly expansive capability to defend itself from relatively sophisticated attacks, but across a relatively small geography. The complexity of doing that with not only polar orbits, but the risk that things come in from other directions as well is really hard. So my guess is that $61 billion number is low.
I'm Mr. Pompeo. Kyle Duggan from the Canadian Press. Our ambassador to the UN, Bob Ray, has made the comparison of the Golden Dome to being a bit of a protection racket. And I'm curious how you perceive that, and whether you think that Canada should think about it another way.
Yeah, I don't think it's remotely a protection racket. I hadn't seen that comment. I think it is a serious attempt by folks who've been frankly working on this for an awfully long time. This isn't a new idea in that sense. I think the president has reinvigorated the work on it, but the idea that it began with NORAD, or perhaps even slightly predates it as a historical matter, but the idea that we would have a joint set of defenses to protect ourselves from things flying into our air defense identification zones and across our borders is real and serious and not remotely aimed at being a protection racket, other than to protect the citizens of the two countries.
You son of a bitch.
You do get the sense
I assume that's not what he meant.
But you do get the sense that Canadians feel like we're being pinched here by America, right? We're under threat of tariffs and so on, and now the Canadian government is looking at this Rearm Europe project. So are you concerned at all that our procurement is going to shift towards Europe if we see the U.S. as an unreliable partner in some ways?
I always worry about that at one level. Conversely, the United States is the security partner for Canada. And conversely, Canada is an incredibly important security partner for the United States. I've seen this idea with rearm. By the way, sign me up. I wish the Europeans would have armed like 50 years ago and been serious about this in a way that they have not been. I'm happy to see that they are now taking the desire to secure Europe and consequently protect America's interest in Europe as well in a serious way. But I think in the end, the relationship between Canada and America is going to remain through Democrats, Republicans, and everything in between in the United States.
Thank you.
Yes, Secretary. James Carlos, Canadian
Hi, James.
Defense Review. Do you think that President Trump has a realistic grasp of the damage he's done to the Canada-U.S. defensive relationship? And if he does he actually care about the damage?
Sorry, could you repeat the beginning of the question again?
Yeah. Do you think that President Trump has a realistic grasp of the damage he has done to the Canada-U.S. defense relationship? And if he does he care about the damage he's done?
Yeah, I think the Canada defense relationship, U.S. relationship is going to remain strong. I'm convinced of it. You describe it as having been damaged. Fair enough, your judgment, not mine. I think I've watched this. I've watched Canadians compete at Sandhurst, at West Point. I've watched the relationship that takes place with very senior officials in our facilities in Colorado and North. I could go on. The list is enormously long, and I'm convinced that whoever stands here as the 90th Secretary of State of the United States of America 50 years from now will say the same thing. I think that's just fundamentally true.
Even though the United States tried to take over Canada in 1776 and 1812?
Yep, that's all true. Hence history. Yep.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Secretary Pompeo. It's Murray Brewster with the
Thank
Canadian
you.
Broadcasting Corporation. You say Canadians ought to trust Americans, but Canadians feel that their sovereignty is under threat. Should we feel that our sovereignty is under threat, given the rhetoric?
No.
Why not?
But because Canada is going to do all the things necessary to protect its own sovereignty. I'm convinced of it.
The new Canadian Prime Minister has said that we're spending 75 cents of every defense dollar in the United States, and that's a mistake. What do you say to that?
This is math. The Prime Minister should do what's best for Canada, right? He should put Canada first. That's his job. That's what the Canadian people hired him to do. He should make good decisions. I'm convinced that when he does that, he will find American technology, American human capital, American businesses, a very attractive proposition for Canadian defense. I think that will continue. I don't think that's going to change. Politicians can't change innovation, technology, the capacity of the human mind, the educational institutions, the military scale and size, a $1 trillion U.S. defense budget, right? That's just, it dwarfs anybody else in the Western world. I think that is so deep and so important and so vital to Canadian security and to American security that I think I get political rhetoric. I once was one of those too. But I think in the end, good security and good math and good economics and the good relationship, deep relationship between all the folks who are here will trump all of that.
I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect.
Mr. Pompeo, thank you for being here.
Yes,
My name is
ma'am.
Anne-Caroline Desplanques, journalist for Le Journal de Montréal in Montreal. I have a question. You said that the word more connected is a safer place, but it's not what Mr. Trump is trying to do. He's trying to disconnect through tariff. It's trying to disconnect us. So would you say that the word will be less safe because of him?
I don't think that's remotely the objective. I think the objective is to create fair and balanced tariff systems as among nations, right? What President Trump has talked about is zero tariffs, zero barriers, more economic prosperity, more connectivity, all to the good. I think that's what he's trying to do. Certainly what I tried to do when I was his Secretary of State. I was I was determined to do that too. I think that's proper. I think that actually creates more connectivity. When the Europeans deny the ability of Americans to sell our farmers' goods from Kansas, my home state, in Europe with non-tariff barriers, that's just indecent. It's unfair. We should have a balanced set of rules that we have amongst each other, and when we do, there'll be more prosperity and the security that flows from that.
You also mentioned that we had a holiday from history, and that Canada took the holiday part very seriously. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, America took it a little too seriously too. I wouldn't exclude us from that. President Clinton hoped that he called it a peace dividend at the time, if I recall it correctly. There was this idea after the fall of the Soviet Union that somehow the world was different and more peaceful, and that this would last for a long time. I don't believe that for a second. Evil walks the planet, and the bad guys will continue to try and undermine the way you and I want to live with the freedoms that we all have. And in Europe, they spent far too little on their own security and defense, not just money, right? This is also cultural and ideological. And so they chased other things. They chased climate change, right? They chased some of these things to the exclusion of the hard power security that's necessary. And I think Canada fell into that as well. I think the United States for a time did also. We all have to remind ourselves that it is not free to have the sovereignty that everyone wants. That costs real money. It costs real human focus. It costs real political challenges and the will that goes alongside it, which was what I was speaking to today. If we don't have the temerity to stand up to the bad guys, they'll walk on us every time. They don't care about human life in the same way we do. That is difficult, I think, sometimes for those of us in the West to appreciate how little they care about human life. And we see that happening even as we stand here today in Ukraine. We see that happening in Western China, where there are 1 million Muslims held in concentration camp-like places for the Uyghur Muslims. Right? They don't value human life in a way. When you walk away from that central understanding and you're unprepared to say we're going to take a little of our finest young men and women and a little bit of our money and resources to protect our sovereignty, then you're at risk of losing it, all of us, and the freedoms that come alongside of that. That was the point that I was trying to make.
Hi, Mr. Pompeo. My name is Lital. I'm a freelancer reporting for Responsible Statecraft. My two questions are related to climate change and the value of human life. So earlier today, you mentioned putting less of an emphasis on the environmental toll of militarization in the Arctic in favor of focusing on projecting strength on the global stage. The U.S. has withdrawn from the Paris Agreement and recently canceled 91 social science and climate-related studies, making it harder to monitor the carbon footprint of militarization in the Arctic and the precipitative impacts on global migration from climate emergencies like drought in the Sahel, which causes mass migration and displacement.
Well,
Reuters has also reported that a Pentagon study found
Do you have a question for me?
in 2018 that nearly half of all U.S. military sites were threatened by weather linked to climate change, so military bases threatened by climate change. What do you think about the security impacts of accelerated climate change from intensified Arctic militarization? That's the first question.
I think we should do science, not politics. And I think much of the climate movement became deeply political and ascientific, standing against the real science. That's what I think. So we should get it right. We should protect people from the threats of rising sea levels to the extent they exist. When ozone is that we should be smart about allocation of resources to provide a total security umbrella. That's what I think. What we shouldn't do is politicize this in a way that I think happened over the last 10, 15 years in a way that was not remotely based on the actual science.
Second question is protesters outside were calling attention to the continued slaughter of Palestinian civilians and investment in arms companies complicit in apartheid, Israel standing accused by the World Court. How do you respond to Canadian protesters outside today calling for divestment from arms companies that are implicated in social cleansing, mass displacements, and illegal settlements in Gaza and the West Bank?
Every individual that is killed in Gaza is a direct result of the Iranian regime and Hamas. They attacked Israel on October 7th, the most indecent attack, the most barbarous attack I have seen in my adult lifetime. And it is the case today that if Hamas would put down its weapons and the Iranians would cease funding Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen, there would be peace in the region. Period. Full stop.
Hi, thanks, Secretary Pompeo. Colby Babb for Defense Archives. What are your thoughts on the Trump administration submitting a flat budget request, defense budget request to Congress in line with President Biden's last year in office?
Yeah, I wish it was a little bit larger, but most important, so fair enough. Most importantly, I wish it was spent more effectively. And this is what I was trying to get to in my remarks today. We talk about 2% or 4% of GDP. The real imperative is value creation. What do you actually get for the money expended? It's what our tax-paying citizens demand. And so what I do hope the Trump administration, the second one, can do is find procurement methodologies and a technology strategy that can actually deliver better value, even if it is at the same total dollars of expenditures.
But you would agree that it should probably be higher than it currently is?
I think the world's more dangerous today than it was even 4.5, 5 years ago. Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.